In the musical Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, the founding father who was an immigrant orphan from the West Indies, has an insatiable ambition to make an impact, to, in the words of one of the songs from the musical based on his life, not throw away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey, yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. The shooting image is not just a metaphor, as Alexander Hamilton was a brilliant soldier who was a great shot himself, and also a man who tragically died of injuries suffered in a duel with his political nemesis, Senator Aaron Burr. This metaphor of taking a shot at something, giving something a shot, your best shot, has been much with me lately. It seems too sadly perfect an American way to express ambition. Aggressive, with a not subtle subtext of violence. I learned through the musical Hamilton something I hadn't known, which is that although a challenge to a duel was frequent between men in the Revolutionary War era, when they were disputing, the aggrieved parties would first send in their seconds, like their right-hand man, to try to settle the matter before actually getting out the pistols. If the peace brokering failed, the men did meet in a field somewhere. They did you've seen it in the movies, the 10 paces, and then turn, aim, and fire. But, this is what I learned, they often would aim their pistols in the air, thus throwing away their shot. On April 4th, 1968, James Earl Ray did not throw away his shot when he took aim at the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. King, of course, was down there to give a speech to sanitation workers. This was not a duel. It was an assassination. There were no seconds sent in advance to try to broker a peace between Earl and King. King's own fight was with the deep racist foundation of most American systems and power structures, not with individuals. But Earl's fight was with one man, Martin Luther King Jr., who he saw as a threat to his white supremacy and the nation's racist structures that he, Earl, thought to be important safeguards against the threat of black civil rights and equal status in this nation. When we say, fight the good fight, how do we tell the difference between the good fight and the other kind? It is not always as obvious as the difference between nonviolent civil disobedience and murder. But knowing how to fight the good fight is a really important source of soul strength. It is something that we need to have in our spiritual toolbox. So let me suggest some frameworks. A good fight has room built into it for varying perspectives, shared discernment, open but carefully managed conflict with healthy boundaries around the conflict, and room for everyone to wind up walking away with their dignity intact. A good fight is one that is productive or has the potential to be, and feels worth the sacrifices made by those who are engaged in that fight. A good fight is part of a greater vision of health, improvement, progress. A bad fight is one where everything just gets burned down to the ground. The fight that seeks only to eliminate, to stop, to silence dissent. A fight that seeks to control. And this is just as true on the small battlegrounds of intimate friend fights and family fights as it is on the national and international level. You know a bad intimate fight. You know a bad family fight. I'm guessing all of us have seen a bad fight. It's where someone goes on a tear, as we say, accusing, destroying, pitting members of the family against each other, gossiping, telling lies, steamrolling anyone's attempt to explain their point of view. It's that temper tantrum that holds a few people hostage, that persists until someone apologizes and someone shuts down to completely stop the emotional or physical punishment. The punishment that comes when one dares to defend themselves or another in this dysfunctional system. A bad fight on this level is where the aggressors feel like bullies, and they stay in that battle until they get what they want, which is usually the status quo. Bad fights are traumatic, and they leave very long-lasting psychic wounds. There's an expression in the evangelical Christian tradition, prayer warriors, that I've often used in secret. But I'm going to admit to you today that I believe in prayer warriors. I know Elzola's going, yeah, you know. I believe that the energy released by prayer is empowering to the one who prays, the one who is the recipient of those prayers, and in some way may shift the spiritual traffic patterns of our lives. I was first acquainted with the expression prayer warriors in the Black church. If you have ever been in the company of folks from the Black church, like Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, you have seen how this kind of spiritual warfare works in the faith community. The preacher calling out evil and sin and calling Jesus in to give the people heart, to protect them, to walk with them, to work a miracle in their lives. And the people in turn pray out evil and pray in the power of love. It is a good fight, a battle against the degrading, annihilating forces of racism and the many other devastations that beset a community, and a fight for justice, peace, reconciliation, and God's blessing and presence with the people. Scripture study can be part of that beautiful fight, struggling to find a word of meaning and blessing and direction in those ancient texts. Being together in community itself is a fight against hyper-individualism and isolation. We know that. We fight that fight here. When Dylan Roof walked into that sacred space at Mother Emanuel Church in June of 2015 with a loaded gun, he introduced violence, hatred, and senseless murder into that house of the good fight. Such a desecration. He thought he was doing something honorable for his version of America, the Confederacy that he's loyal to. There was, of course, no honor whatsoever in his act, just destruction. In a good fight, no player, no participant ever seeks to stop, to silence, to assert dominance in a struggle by any means necessary. Roof was sentenced to death this past week. I am torn about that. A bad fight ending with another bad fight. The state against the criminal ending in another death. A bad fight is always a lose-lose and hurts everyone. But as Theodore Parker, the 19th century Unitarian abolitionist minister, wrote, and Martin Luther King Jr. later quoted him, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice." We have to help bend that moral arc, which is very hard and takes a tremendous amount of patience and good fighting. Because the thing is, nothing at all happens to move history along in the right direction if it's not fought for. But knowing how to fight is such a monumental task. You can even get a group of really like-minded people together, really well-meaning people together, say religious liberals like Unitarian Universalists, who agree on all the basic moral principles of dignity for all people, compassion for the sick and the poor, the need to generously share resources to help one another, advocacy for equal civil rights of all Americans, regardless of race or gender or sexual orientation or religion. But my Lord, do you think we can agree on how to fight the good fight? Oh, it's so hard. And we do not. We fall all over each other attempting this. Part of the job of the minister is to help individuals and congregations fight well and fairly and productively, because there's no surer way to slowly drain the spirit from an institution than making sure that there's never any open conflict. It's actually poison to do that. It's like a suffocation. You gotta have it. You gotta do it as well as we can. So, as part of my helping and teaching about that, I want to identify this morning one way that I myself am focusing on with other activists and other people of faith in communities like ours that want to fight the good fight. And so I'm identifying one of the most important ways that people in organizations can undermine, create chaos, and misdirect what are potentially very good fights. Here's the one that I'm focusing on lately and learning a lot about. And it is the way that even well-meaning people in the attempt to move the moral arc of the universe in the direction of justice can take everything personally and insist that the group attend to their individual feelings every step along the way of a group process. When one person does this in a small group, say a family trying to get through a tough time, that can be accommodated without too much trouble, unless that person is a narcissist who has to have his or her own version of reality affirmed at all costs, even at the cost of everyone else's truth and experience, which shuts everybody else down. They will withdraw their truth to make room. The person who's withdrawing will withdraw their truth in order to make room for the enormous ego needs of the narcissist. But in a healthy family, people can walk carefully through conflict and really hear out the feelings and really deal with people on an individual level. But in a larger group dynamic, when it's healthy, we have relationships and spiritual practices by which we can work out our personal feelings so that we can move together as a community in big initiatives without having to stop for every single person who has a feeling or an opinion. And this is like a dance that we do. The leaders move the group forward through institutional goals and strategies, and the people remain in conversation about their personal feelings, which is something we do as congregations. And the movement happens slowly. You take a step forward, then you take a step to the side, and then you take a step back. No one dominates. Everyone collaborates. But conflicts get you somewhere, and no one holds the process back. Ideally, when the whole thing is over, everybody looks at each other and says, we fought a good fight, and it brought us somewhere, and it was worth it. Even if some of us feel a little bruised and scratched, we will heal. We will work on healing. We will work to repair any of the scratches we incurred along the way. I heard Nancy Ladd, a UU preacher, say in a wonderful sermon this past summer, anti-racist organizer Mickey Scott B. Jones has said that relationship is the sandpaper that wears away our resistance to change. Relationship is the abrasion that agitates enough to make a way forward. It is relationship, consistent and ongoing encounter with people and perspectives different than our own, that smooths the way for the sacred, even as it rubs us raw. So that friction is part of the beautiful struggle we're in. It is where some of the bleeding comes from. In larger social justice work, we call the insistence that my feelings and my status as a good person takes precedence in a group process as privilege or as centering. It's often a stumbling block thrown onto the field of the good fight of anti-racism work by white people who are uncomfortable and want to assure everyone that they're good people. They're not racist. Or if it's a man in women's rights workspaces, he's not sexist. He's never raped anyone. And I remember the struggle over this when women were telling their stories of sexual assault with the hashtag, yes, all women. And men kept responding, but I've never done that, but I've never done that. And it's like, just sit and listen. Just listen and witness. We're sharing something important with you. It's not, your feelings are important, but this is justice work. This is a truth we have to get out. Please don't stop us from telling our truth because you haven't done this personally. Often these objections to correct the people leading the work are an irony that escapes those doing the interrupting. White people centering their experience and feelings around people of color doing justice work do not see that they're diverting the effort, behaving actually in an oppressive way, and exhausting finite resources, finite emotional resources, because they haven't done their own work of understanding racism as a system. They are still seeing it entirely in personal, interrelational terms. The same dynamic plays out with heterosexual people in queer activist spaces. I'm not transphobic. I know somebody transgender. I'm not homophobic. I have lots of gay friends. All conversation has to stop so everyone can soothe and reassure the anxious one. But what's happening lately is that less and less the movement forward, the good fight, is stopping to tend to those personal feelings. And I'm happy to see that. It says, you're gonna be okay. You'll be all right. You deal with your emotions, get some support for that with your folks, but we got work here to do. We gotta move this moral arc forward. We're bending that thing. And we've got we've been spending a lot of energy doing that. Which leads me to the last word I have for us this morning on how to engage in the good fight in our spiritual toolkit through learning. Learning, one of our favorite things. Go ye and study. I mean that for everybody who wants to be part of the good fight. We are nonviolent fighters. In the words of that wonderful gospel song, we are soldiers in the army of the Lord. And if that's too militant an image for you, let's say that we are standing on the side of love, with no weapon in our hands but fierce passion and fidelity to our principles, to our vision of the earth made fair with all her people one. Learning, study, and knowledge are our tools in the construction of the better world we wish for. Not just information, my friends, but knowledge. And God help us, even wisdom. We march on. Some in spirit, some in body. We move ahead, pushing the moral arc of the universe together with God's help and strength. The love that Martin Luther King believed would never forsake us. In Martin's name and memory, and in all of those who have fought the good fight, do we march on? Do we bend the moral arc of the universe with all our might? And do we sing? And so now let us sing the wonderful African-American anthem, national anthem. Lift every voice and sing.